All right, so I want to talk now about the placenta. The placenta begins to form an implantation when the blastocyst, when that placental side of the blastocyst actually starts to send the little projections in. Those are called chorionic villi. Remember, villi are little projections with a thin membrane that allow for diffusion of molecules across that membrane. So the chorionic villi actually invade the uterine capillaries. The spiral arteries, remember we talked about spiral arteries with the menstrual cycle, how they feed the endometrium? Well, those arteries continue to fill with blood. They don't spasm. If we have a pregnancy, they don't spasm, so they continue to fill with blood. And when the chorionic villi invade the capillaries, it kind of we kind of end up with this lake of blood being fed by the spiral arteries that's below the placenta. And then the placenta has the villi sticking down into the maternal blood. So the maternal blood flows through this space below the placenta, and across the membrane of those villi, we get oxygen and carbon dioxide, and we get nutrient and waste transfer. Okay. So the maternal blood and the fetal blood do not mix under normal conditions. Now, there are some things that can happen that can cause them to mix, and then there are some potential complications of that, but normally they don't mix, okay? Those chorionic villi form in two layers, and then there's a third layer that forms into septa or dividers. And so when the placenta forms, it's in sections called cotyledons. There's about 15 to 20 cotyledons that form the placenta. By day 17, the placenta is in place. It continues to grow. By the end of the third week, the embryonic heart is, and remember that heart is just the two tubes, and it's circulating blood between the embryo and the chorionic villi. Okay, so blood goes from the embryo to the placenta through those chorionic villi. We have gas, nutrient, waste exchange there, and then it goes back through the placenta, back through the cord to the embryo. The maternal blood is in that space underneath. Now, if we just have blood kind of pouring out into that lake space underneath the placenta, why doesn't the mother bleed to death? Because the placenta is providing some pressure, so it's like tamponaded off there. The arteries keep putting blood in, veins take blood out, but it's that open space, but the placenta is preventing that blood from just flowing freely. That becomes important when we have problems with the placenta. Okay, so the placenta not only provides for exchange of gases, nutrient, and waste, it also produces hormones to maintain the pregnancy. And one of the hormones it produces is HCG. So HCG levels remain up until sometime after pregnancy is ended. What things can affect the placental function? What things can make the placenta not function well? If that membrane is broken, then fetal blood can get into the maternal bloodstream, and the mother's immune system can produce antibodies that can then cross the placenta and attack fetal blood cells. So that's one potential issue. Another issue, if the mother's blood pressure is chronically elevated, it causes microvascular damage. Remember that high blood pressure over time damages blood vessels. That's why people with chronic hypertension that's not treated end up with renal failure and heart failure, because it damages those vessels. Well, the placenta is just a big organ made up of blood vessels. And so the placenta can have microvascular damage over time due to maternal high blood pressure. If the mother's blood pressure is not low enough to adequately circulate blood into that lake below the placenta, then the oxygen and nutrient, or is not high enough, sorry, if it's too low to circulate blood, then oxygen and nutrient supply to the fetus is impaired. Okay, now there are several things that can cause blood pressure to that placental bed to be low. Okay, and those can be chronic problems, or those can be acute problems that happen right now. Mild contractions actually may increase circulation to the placenta, but longer, stronger contractions can impair blood flow. And when we have contractions without a lot of rest between, that means less blood flow to the placenta. That becomes important in labor. Okay, so the next section we're going to talk about is the fetus, the development of from the end of the embryonic phase, when the embryo becomes fetus, to delivery.